to the National Archives. Can you hear me? All the way back there? We welcome you. My name is Steve Scully from the C-SPAN Networks, and I want to first tell you what an honor it is to be here with all of you, the home of America's most important documents. Now, this is the day that we pay tribute to those brave 56 men, including 2 future presidents, who signed, of course, the Declaration of Independence. So as we celebrate our birthday, first, how many of you are first-time visitors to Washington, D.C.? We welcome you. Welcome to your nation's capital. You are in front of the home that is the permanent home for the Declaration of Independence. And by joining us here on Constitution Avenue, you're part of a kickoff of events on a picture-perfect day. Arthur has left us. We're going to have a beautiful day and a terrific evening. Now, after the ceremony, stay right here because the parade will get underway. The National Independence Parade starts at about 11:45. And during the course of the day, if you want a break, we hope that you'll come inside the National Archives to see the Declaration of Independence and also participate in a whole lot of family activities. So it's going to be a fun morning and a fun afternoon. And then tonight, the National Symphony Orchestra will cap things off with a Capitol Fourth on the west front of the U.S. Capitol, just a few blocks down the street. And then after the concert, you can enjoy, by far, the most spectacular fireworks anywhere in the country on your mall, on your front yard, the National Mall. Now, I should point out that it was not a tweet, but just 12 words in the Philadelphia Gazette, which was owned by Benjamin Franklin, that pointed out the significance of this week in 1776. The dateline was Philadelphia, and he pointed out that yesterday the Continental Congress declared the United Colonies free and independent states. Benjamin Franklin, who is here today, John Hancock, and others, pledging their lives, their fortune for an independent America. Your job today is to keep the conversation going. The Twitter is @USNatArchives, and we want you to share in on the July 4th experience using the hashtags ArchivesJuly4. That's Archives July 4th, and there it is right there. A round of applause for the sign in front of you in case you miss it. Look for the signs, look for the hashtags, and join us on Twitter. Now, in addition, there's a couple of fun things that are new this year. While you're enjoying your 4th of July holiday, we want you to snap a picture with some of the reenactors, Thomas Jefferson, General George Washington, anything that strikes you as colonial. Now, for that, you need to use the hashtag #ColonialSelfie, send it to us on Twitter @USNatArchives, and we'll send it out. That's number one. Number two, you can play Instagram bingo with the National Archives. Now, throughout the day, look for 9 4th of July themed scenes. Now, once you have 9, create a collage, post it on Instagram with the hashtag bingo or National Archives July 4th, Archives July 4. Then your photos will be shared on Instagram. Again, the hashtag for Twitter is #ColonialSelfie or Archives July 4th, and join us on Twitter @USNatArchives. It's going to be fun. So thanks for being with us. Stick around and celebrate our independence. Now, if you're not standing already, I'm going to ask all of you to please rise for the presentation of colors. We want to welcome the 3rd United States U.S. Infantry Continental Color Guard, known as the Old Guard, joined by U.S. Navy soloist Kenny Ray Horton, musician first class, singing the national anthem.
Oh, say, can you see by the dawn's early light what so proudly we hailed at the twilight's last gleaming, whose broad stripes and bright stars through the perilous fight o'er the ramparts we watched were so gallantly streaming, and the rocket's red glare, the bombs bursting in air, gave proof through the night that our flag was still there. Oh, say, does that star-spangled banner yet wave o'er the land of the free and the home of the brave?
U.S. Navy soloist Kenny Ray Horton. Thank you very much. Another round of applause. And to the Old Guard. Again, thank you very much. By the way, if you are a veteran of the U.S. Army, U.S. Navy, Marine Corps, Air Force, Coast Guard, thank you all very much for your service, for protecting our freedoms today and every day. We salute you. We appreciate all that you do every single day. Thank you very much. Now imagine for just a moment that we're not here in Washington, D.C., on this beautiful day outside the National Archives, but we are standing in front of Independence Hall in Philadelphia, Pennsylvania on the morning of July 4th, 1776. To help you give a sense of what colonial America was like, we are pleased to present the 3rd United States Infantry Old Guard Fife and Drum Corps. Their uniforms are from that period, so is their music. And joining us, I'm pleased to welcome Army Specialist Lauren Wheeler to narrate their performance. Ladies and gentlemen, the Old Guard Fife and Drum Corps and Army Specialist Lauren Wheeler.
Ladies and gentlemen, please be seated. Good morning, ladies and gentlemen. The United States Army Military District of Washington, under the command of Major General Jeffrey Buchanan, is proud to present the United States Army Old Guard Fife and Drum Corps. The 3rd United States Infantry Regiment, the Old Guard, traces its lineage back to the 1st American Regiment of the 1784, and today serves as the Army's official escort to the President of the United States. In 1960, the Fife and Drum Corps was organized to participate in official ceremonies and to revive our country's musical heritage. As one of the Army's premier musical organizations, the Corps performs for visiting dignitaries and heads of state at the White House and throughout our nation's capital. In addition, the Corps travels extensively, averaging 500 performances annually, while serving as a goodwill ambassador for the Army across the nation and abroad. Ladies and gentlemen, please join me in welcoming the United States Army Old Guard Fife and Drum Corps. Ladies and gentlemen, the United States Army Old Guard Fife and Drum Corps. From the days of the American Revolution through the 19th century, Army field musicians played a vital role in maintaining good order, discipline, and morale. The sounds of the fife, bugle, and drum acted as the voice of the commander, signaling to the soldiers when to rise, how to move in battle, and when to retire for the evening. The soldiers of the Old Guard Fife and Drum Corps wear uniforms patterned after the musicians of George Washington's Continental Army. In order to be easily identified, military musicians of the period wore the reverse colors of the regiment to which they were assigned. In 1784, infantry soldiers of the 1st American Regiment wore blue coats with red trim. Thus, the musicians of the time wore red coats trimmed in blue. The instruments used by the Corps are patterned after traditional field instruments of the period. These modernized versions allow the musicians to perform more contemporary arrangements than the music found in the manuscripts of the 18th and 19th centuries. Listen now as the Corps features the fife, bugle, and drum, bringing to life the sights and sounds of our country's musical heritage. Throughout the history of the American Army, one of the most significant duties for the field musician was to render honors to the flag of the United States of America. The Corps will now play music from the retreat ceremony, an occasion where the flag is lowered, signaling the end of the duty day, and conclude the performance with their signature melody, Yankee Doodle. Once again, ladies and gentlemen, the United States Army Old Guard Fife and Drum Corps. On behalf of the Old Guard Commander Colonel Johnny Davis and the Fife and Drum Corps Commander Chief Warrant Officer Joseph Newby, it has been our pleasure performing for you today.
Thank you very much, Army Specialist Lauren Wheeler and the Old Guard. Now, we want to make a little history. Now, history was made 238 years ago. Does anyone here have a smartphone? Take it out right now, all of you. Take out the smartphone and take a selfie with you, a family member, a neighbor, a stranger. The hashtag is colonial selfie. It doesn't have to be with a colonial figure. We want you to send it out on the count of 5. So take the picture right now. The Twitter hashtag is USNatArchives. So after you get the picture, oh, there we go. David Ferriero is, love it. On the count of 5, 4, 3, 2, 1, send it out. USNatArchives. Let's take over the Twitter universe. As we said earlier, the building behind me is the home of the Declaration of Independence, but it's an extraordinary piece of parchment. It is just one of millions of documents entrusted in the care of the National Archives. Not only documents, but photographs and films, the holdings of the National Archives that tell the great and beautiful and wonderful story of our fabulous nation. The mission of the archives is to make sure that these documents are available to all of you. So I'd like to begin with a round of applause for the people, the staff, the volunteers at the National Archives who work every single day to protect these documents. And remember, they're not only here, you can check them out anytime at archives.gov. the man who's been entrusted to care for everything from the Declaration of Independence to our Constitution to Abraham Lincoln's Emancipation Proclamation to our Bill of Rights is David Ferriero. He is the Archivist of the United States. Sworn in just 6 years ago, he is only the 10th person to hold this very important position. Let me just briefly give you some background on his extraordinary career. He served as the Andrew W. Mellon Director of the New York Public Libraries, and before that, he held 2 positions at 2 major academic university libraries, MIT in Cambridge, Massachusetts, if anyone's here from Boston, and Duke University in Durham, North Carolina. He holds 2 degrees from 2 Boston schools, Northeastern University, and the Simmons College of Library and Information Science. He is also a proud veteran of the U.S. Navy, serving in the Vietnam War as a hospital corpsman. Go Navy! Ladies and gentlemen, Mr. David Ferriero, the Archivist of the United States.
Thanks to Steve Scully for this his 3rd year as MC of our July 4th activities. Good morning and happy 4th of July to all of you. Thanks for joining us in this celebration of the 238th birthday of the Declaration of Independence. 238 years ago, the Continental Congress adopted the Declaration, and John Adams envisioned future celebrations of the event. He wrote, "It ought to be commemorated as the day of deliverance by solemn acts of devotion to God Almighty. It ought to be solemnized with pomp and parade, with shows, games, sports, guns, bells, bonfires, and illuminations from one end of this continent to the other, from this time forward forevermore." That vision of the future got off to a slow but no less passionate start. On July 5th, 1777, John Adams wrote to his daughter from Philadelphia describing events of the first anniversary. Invited to dine with President Washington aboard the frigate Delaware, Adams wrote, "We were saluted with a discharge of 13 guns, which was followed by 13 others from each other vessel in the river. Then the galleys followed the fire, and after them the guard boats. The President and company were saluted with 3 cheers from every ship, galley, and boat in the river. The wharves and shores were lined with a vast concourse of people, all shouting and huzzahing in a manner which gave great joy to every friend of this country and utmost terror and dismay to every lurking Tory." Adams continues, "In the evening, I was walking about the streets for a little fresh air and exercise and was surprised to find the whole city lighting up their candles at the windows. I walked most of the evening, and I think it was the most splendid illumination I ever saw. A few surly houses were dark, but the lights were very universal. Considering the lateness and design and suddenness of the execution, I was amazed at the universal joy and alacrity that was discovered and the brilliancy and splendor of every part of this joyful exhibition. Had General Howe been here in disguise or his master, this show would have given them heartache." The parchment document enshrined in the rotunda behind me has had an amazing journey since it was actually signed on August 2nd, 1776. During the Revolutionary War, the Declaration was rolled up and moved from city to city as Congress moved to avoid capture by the British. When the British were burning Washington during the War of 1812, Stephen Pleasanton, a clerk in the State Department, was directed to get the important documents out of town. Clerks wrapped the Declaration and other precious documents in bags of linen, commandeered wagons, and in the dead of night headed for Virginia with the records of the country. First, they hid the Declaration in an unused grist mill near Chainbridge in Virginia, then in a private home in Leesburg until the war was over. During the 1800s, the Declaration was on exhibit for long periods at several locations in Washington, where it was exposed to sunlight, fluctuating temperatures, and humidity, all of which took their toll on the document. Finally, officials took note of these effects of aging and wrapped the Declaration and stored it flat at the State Department, where it joined the Constitution until 1921, when President Harding signed an order transferring both of those documents to the Library of Congress. Just before Pearl Harbor and the U.S. entrance into the World War II, the library sent the Declaration and the Constitution to Fort Knox for safekeeping, where they remained until September 1944 and came back to the Library of Congress. And finally, in 1952, the documents came to their rightful home here at the National Archives. The transfer occurred on December 13, 1952, with great pomp and circumstance and security, as the newly encased Declaration of Independence was carried up these very steps into the rotunda. And the Declaration of Independence was safe until 2004, when the good treasure hunter Nicolas Cage cleverly stole it during a party in this building to protect it from the evil treasure hunter. And our national treasure was miraculously and circuitously restored to its rightful place and now poses the most often asked question in the rotunda: can I see the back of the Declaration of Independence? And I can tell you for certain that the only thing written on the back of the Declaration are the words, "Original Declaration of Independence, dated 4 July 1776. Although the traveling days of the Declaration are over, the spirit of the Declaration continues today, and soon we'll hear the words of the Declaration of Independence read aloud by our honored guests. And being here today makes you part of the Declaration's journey. After our ceremonies, I hope you'll enjoy our family activities and view the Declaration of Independence yourself. Check out John Hancock's signature, and then check out our newest exhibit, Making Their Mark, Stories Through Signatures, where you can create your own John Hancock signature from the auto pen machine. Thanks for coming out today to celebrate our independence at the home of the birthplace of the Declaration of Independence, and enjoy the rest of our ceremony.
David Ferriero, thank you very much. The one question I have is, do you sell replicas in the gift shop, and what are the chances of getting the original? Thank you very much. I'm now happy to introduce a very distinguished group of individuals who will read the Declaration of Independence. Our first two readers, people you might be familiar with, General George Washington and Mrs. Abigail Adams. Now, we've been getting some questions via social media. By the way, how are those selfies coming along? Be sure to send more out. The sign is out there. Archives July 4th is a hashtag. General Washington, where's General Washington? There he is over there. General Washington, a question from one of our friends on social media. What do you do in your free time?
What precisely is free time? Time is rarely free. I enjoy spending time with my beloved Patsy at my property at Mount Vernon. Indeed.
Well, we appreciate you making the journey from Mount Vernon to our nation's capital, which appropriately enough is named after you, kind sir.
Thank you so much for having me. It is an honor indeed.
General Washington, thank you. And next, to read the grievances against King George III, we have three of the leaders of the Second Continental Congress, Mr. Thomas Jefferson, Mr. John Adams, and Dr. Benjamin Franklin. These three gentlemen will know the words of the Declaration probably better than anyone else. All three served on the committee to draft the Declaration. And who was the primary author? Who has the answer to that? Of course, Thomas Jefferson. Now, Dr. Franklin, we have a question for you as you get situated. This is from the Twitter account Arrow252525 with the question, what do you enjoy most, Dr. Franklin, being an inventor, a statesman, a publisher, or something else? And tell us why.
Oh, good heavens. Well, I think that I enjoyed most the opportunity to serve my fellow man, my fellow citizens in all of those roles. Upon my death, I would like it to be said with regard to me that he lived useful, not he died rich.
Wise advice, Dr. Franklin. Thank you. And also, to read the names of the 56 signers of the Declaration, we are pleased to welcome back Private Edward Ned Hector of the 3rd Pennsylvania Artillery Company. He is a free black colonial soldier. He is a respected patriot and a hero. Now, this is a question for any one of you. What is your favorite place to visit in our young nation, and tell us why?
Can I go first?
Ladies first.
Ladies first. Well, I always actually prefer to be home under my own vine and apple tree, of course, in Braintree, Massachusetts. Oh, good New Englanders, you, yes? But I do enjoy also visiting wherever my children are. And at present, my daughter, when the country was first founded, was in New York. So I did like visiting her, because she'd gotten about the business of giving me grandchildren. So I always like to be wherever my family is.
Thank you, Mrs. Adams. What about your husband?
John Adams, for once, will be succinct.
No. For once.
My favorite place to visit is wherever Mrs. Adams is.
Very wise advice indeed.
Can see why we've been married for 250 years.
And no time off for good behavior.
And finally, Mr. Jefferson, your favorite place to visit?
For my favorite place to visit, I will disappoint you by not going very far. I could never want to be anywhere but my own dear beloved Monticello. That being said, if you would require me to travel away from Monticello, then I would very much like to travel back to the southern coast of France. Wouldn't you all? Yes, yes.
I wouldn't.
Private Hector.
Sir, as a teamster and as a man who travels much, oh, the roads, the back roads of Pennsylvania, lovely beyond description.
Pennsylvanians.
Thank you all. I'm going to have them get to the stage. Please sit down, relax, and enjoy the words of the Declaration of Independence.
You must pardon me. I have grown gray in your service, and now I find myself going blind. In Congress, July 4th, 1776, the unanimous declaration of the 13 United States of America.
Huzzah! Huzzah!
When in the course of human events it becomes necessary for one people to dissolve the political bands which have connected them with another, and to assume among the powers of the earth the separate and equal station to which the laws of nature and of nature's God entitle them, a decent respect to the opinions of mankind requires that they should declare the causes which impel them to the separation.
We hold these truths to be self-evident, that all men are created equal, and that they are endowed by their Creator with certain unalienable rights, and that among these are life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness. That to secure these rights, governments are instituted among men, deriving their just powers from the consent of the governed. And that whenever any form of government becomes destructive of these ends, it is the right of the people to alter or to abolish it.
Huzzah! Huzzah!
And to institute new government, laying its foundation on such principles and organizing its powers in such form as to them shall seem most likely to affect their safety and happiness.
Prudence indeed will dictate that governments long established should not be changed for light and transient causes, and accordingly all experience hath shewn that mankind are more disposed to suffer while evils are sufferable than to right themselves by abolishing the forms to which they are accustomed. But when a long train of abuses and usurpations, pursuing invariably the same object, evinces a design to reduce them under absolute despotism, it is their right, it is their duty to throw off such government and to provide new guards for their future security. Huzzah! Hear, hear.
Such has been the patient sufferance of these colonies, and such is now the necessity which constrains them to alter their former systems of government. The history of the present King of Great Britain is a history of repeated usurpations and injuries, all having in direct object the establishment of an absolute tyranny over these states. To prove this, let facts be submitted to a candid world.
He has refused his assent to laws, the most wholesome and necessary for the public good. Yes, I know.
He has forbidden his governors to pass laws of immediate and pressing importance, unless suspended in their operation until his assent should be obtained, and when so suspended, he has utterly neglected to attend to them.
He has refused to pass other laws for the accommodation of large districts of people, unless those people would relinquish the right of representation in the legislature, a right inestimable to them and formidable to tyrants only.
He has called together legislative bodies in places unusual, uncomfortable, and distant from the depository of their public records, for the sole purpose of fatiguing them into compliance with his measures.
He has dissolved representative houses repeatedly for opposing with manly firmness his invasions on the rights of the people.
He has refused for a long time, after such dissolutions, to cause others to be elected, whereby the legislative powers, incapable of annihilation, have returned to the people at large for their exercise, the state remaining in the meantime exposed to all the dangers of invasion from without and convulsions within.
He has endeavored to prevent the population of these states, for that purpose, obstructing the laws for naturalization of foreigners, refusing to pass others to encourage their migration hither, and raising the conditions of new appropriations of lands.
He has obstructed the administration of justice by refusing his assent to laws for establishing judiciary powers.
He has made judges dependent on his will alone for the tenure of their offices and the amount and payment of their salaries.
He has erected a multitude of new offices and sent hither swarms of officers to harass our people and eat out their substance.
He has kept among us in times of peace standing armies without the consent of our legislature.
He has affected to render the military independent of and superior to the civil power.
he has combined with others to subject us to a jurisdiction foreign to our Constitution and unacknowledged by our laws, giving his assent to their acts of pretended legislation for quartering large bodies of armed troops among us, for protecting them by a mock trial for any murders they should commit on the inhabitants of these states, for cutting off our trade with all parts of the world, for imposing taxes on us without our consent, for depriving us in many cases of the benefits of trial by jury, for transporting us beyond seas to be tried for pretended offenses, for abolishing the free system of English laws in a neighboring province, establishing therein an arbitrary government, and enlarging its boundaries so as to render it at once an example and fit instrument for introducing the same absolute rule into these colonies, for taking away our charters, abolishing our most valuable laws, and altering fundamentally the forms of our governments, for suspending our own legislatures and declaring themselves invested with power to legislate for us in all cases whatsoever.
He has abdicated government here by declaring us out of his protection and waging war against us.
He has plundered our seas, ravaged our coasts, burnt our towns, and destroyed the lives of our people.
He is at this time transporting large armies of foreign mercenaries to complete the works of death, desolation, and tyranny already begun with circumstances of cruelty and perfidy scarcely paralleled in the most barbarous ages, and totally unworthy the head of a civilized nation.
He has constrained our fellow citizens taken captive on the high seas to bear arms against their country, to become the executioners of their friends and brethren, or to fall themselves by their hands.
He has excited domestic insurrections amongst us and has endeavored to bring on the inhabitants of our frontiers the merciless Indian savages whose known rule of warfare is an undistinguished destruction of all ages, sexes, and conditions.
In every stage of these oppressions, we have petitioned for redress in the most humble terms. Our repeated petitions have been answered only by repeated injury. A prince whose character is thus marked by every act which may define a tyrant is unfit to be the ruler of a free people.
Nor have we been wanting in our attentions to our British brethren. We have warned them from time to time of attempts by their legislature to extend an unwarrantable jurisdiction over us. We have reminded them of the circumstances of our emigration and settlement here. We have appealed to their native justice and magnanimity. And we have conjured them by the ties of our common kindred to disavow these usurpations, which would inevitably interrupt our connection and our correspondence. They, too, have been deaf to the voice of justice and of consanguinity. We must, therefore, acquiesce in the necessity which denounces our separation and hold them as we hold the rest of mankind. enemies in war, in peace, friends.
We, therefore, the representatives of the United States of America, in General Congress assembled, appealing to the Supreme Judge of the world for the rectitude of our intentions, do in the name and by the authority of the good people of these colonies solemnly publish and declare that these united colonies are, and of right ought to be, free and independent states. That they are absolved from all allegiance to the British Crown, and that all political connection between them and the state of Great Britain is and ought to be totally dissolved. And that as free and independent states, they have full power to levy war, conclude peace, contract alliances, establish commerce, and to do all other acts and things which independent states may of right do.
And for the support of this declaration, we, with a firm reliance on the protection of divine providence, we mutually pledge to each other our lives, our fortunes, and our sacred honor.
Huzzah! 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 Huzzah!
Rise up!
Huzzah!
We should make room for Mr. Hector, for Private Hector. Yes?
Well done.
Thank you very much. General Washington, Mrs. Adams, Mr. Jefferson, Mr. Adams, and Dr. Franklin, how compelling and stirring to hear those words 238 years later. And now today they will move around to get selfies with all of you. Remember, show the sign, hashtags archives July 4, there it is, at USNet Archives. Send us a tweet. Thank you very, very much. We also want to recognize probably the signer with the best penmanship, Mr. John Hancock, who is here as well. John Hancock, thank you for joining us. There he is over there. And now, it's my pleasure to introduce Private Hector, who will read the names of the colonies and the 56 signers who pledged their lives and fortune for America's independence and freedom. Now, in colonial times, as you can see from the sign in the center of the street, it was customary to shout, "Huzzah!" as approval. And so after Private Sector reads all of the names from the signers, let's state our huzzah for approval. Now let's see how well you're going to do. Let's practice. On the count of 3. 1, 2, 3.
Huzzah!
No? How'd they do?
You can do much better than that.
Okay. I have to tell you, if you don't get much better, there's a boat waiting at the marina to head you back to England. So let's try it one more time with a lot more energy. 1, 2, 3. Huzzah! Much better. Now remember, we're going to wait for Private Hector to read all of the names from each state, and then we'll shout our huzzah for approval. And now the names of the signers of the Declaration of Independence. Private Hector.
President of the Continental Congress, the Honorable John Hancock. Georgia, Button, Gwinnett, Lyman, Hall, and George Wharton. Huzzah! North Carolina, William Hope, Joseph Hughes, and John Penn. Huzzah! South Carolina, Edward Rutledge, Thomas Hayward Jr., Thomas Lynch Jr., and Arthur Middleton. Huzzah! Maryland, Samuel Chase, William Paca, Thomas Stone, and Charles Carroll of Carrollton. Huzzah! Virginia, George Wythe, Richard Henry Lee, Thomas Jefferson, Benjamin Harrison, Thomas Nelson Jr., Francis Lightfoot Lee, and Carter Braxton. Huzzah! Pennsylvania. Robert Morris, Benjamin Rush, Benjamin Franklin,
Huzzah!
John Morton, George Clymer, James Smith, George Taylor, James Wilson, and George Ross. Huzzah! Delaware! Thank you. Caesar Rodney, George Reed, and Thomas McKean. Huzzah! New York! William Lloyd, Philip Livingston, Francis Lewis, and Lewis Morris. Huzzah! New Jersey, Richard Stockton, John Weatherspoon, Francis Hopkinson, John Hart, and Abraham Clark. Huzzah! New Hampshire, Matthew Thornton, Josiah Bartlett, and William Whipple. Huzzah! Massachusetts, Samuel Adams, John Adams, Robert Treat Payne, and Elbridge Gary. Huzzah! Rhode Island, Stephen Hopkins, William Ellery. Huzzah! Connecticut, Roger Sherman, Samuel Huntington, William Williams, and Oliver Walcott. Huzzah! And to attest to this is the Secretary, Charles Thompson. And the Assembly Chair shouted, Huzzah!
Thank you, Private Hector. For more than 30 years, the National Archives has put on this tremendous display to honor one of our most significant days in American history. Now, before I conclude, I want to remind you of some activities going on throughout the course of the day. David Ferriero talked about some of them, the parade that will begin underway. The archives, by the way, is open until 5 o'clock tonight. Don't miss your chance to look at the Declaration of Independence, the Constitution, the Bill of Rights, and the documents that shaped our country. You can also view the Magna Carta, explore the public vaults, and a new exhibit called Making Their Mark, Stories Through Signatures. The National Independence Day Parade will get underway at 11:45 in about 40 minutes. And we also have a number of activities going on inside the archives until 4 o'clock at the Boeing Center. Now, we want to make sure you keep those colonial selfies coming, and there's some over there. I see Thomas Jefferson, I see Dr. Franklin, I see George Washington. Be sure to hashtag Archives July 4, and it's at Twitter at USNat Archives. And finally, I want to thank the people that make this day possible: the National Archives Foundation, the American Historical Theater, and our founding fathers, Thomas Jefferson, John Adams, Ben Franklin. We also want to welcome John Hancock. And our representatives of the Continental Army, Private Ned Hector, and of course our very special guest, George Washington, General Washington, and Abigail Adams. Thank you all. Thank you to the foundation. We want to thank our friends from the U.S. Navy and soloist Kenny Ray Horton, musician first class. And in just a moment, you don't want to leave. You're in for a real treat. We saw the prelude this morning, but you're going to hear from four-time international whistling champion Christopher Ullman. This is something, trust me, you will not want to miss. So don't walk away. Stay where you're at. We also want to thank the 3rd U.S. Infantry Old Guard Fife and Drum Corps, the Continental Color Guard, today's lead sponsor, appropriately enough, John Hancock Financial, a great friend of the archives, Ms. Linda Waters, and the law firm Dykema for their continued support of what we do here every 4th of July. Thank you very much. This celebration is not possible without the hard work of the staff and volunteers of the National Archives. You met David Ferriero. I want to put a special shout out to Quinn Brewster, and also to some amazing volunteers, including Aaron Davis, Andrew Henley, and Kayla Murphy. And finally, thanks to all of you for coming down today, for being part of the celebration as we celebrate and honor our 238th birthday. To conclude the program, you're going to enjoy this. 4-time international whistling champion, Christopher Ullman, who will perform America the Beautiful. Thank you. Thank you. Christopher Ullman, thank you very much.
Thank you very much.
To all of our friends here, General Washington, Dr. Franklin, Mr. Adams, Abigail Adams, Mr. Jefferson, John Hancock, a chance for you to get a picture up here. Thank you all very much.
Thank you. One more picture up front. One more up here. One is up there. Yes, go down that direction.